Liara always walked like someone who wished to disappear. On the large space station called Horizon 6, thousands of crew members moved loudly through the halls, but she moved so quietly that people often did not notice when she passed by. Her long dark cloak covered her from neck to feet, and the hood stayed low on her head, hiding her face. If anyone looked in her direction, she always turned away. She never spoke unless someone directly asked her a question, and even then, her answers were soft, almost frightened. Most thought she was simply shy. But Ethan, the human engineer, felt something much deeper behind her silence. Ethan had been working on Horizon 6 for 2 years, and he had seen many alien races. Some were proud, some aggressive, some emotional, and some logical. But none of them carried the kind of sadness he saw in Liara. Whenever she passed by, she kept her arms close to her body, holding the cloak tightly as if she feared the world would hurt her if she let go. She never joined crew meals, never trained with the others, and never stood in the open light. She always stayed near shadows, corners, and empty rooms. Ethan noticed her many times standing alone near a window, staring at the stars with a heavy expression, like she wanted to be anywhere except inside her own skin. One evening, after a long repair shift, Ethan walked down a silent corridor. The lights were dim, and the usual voices of crew members were gone. That was when he heard it, a soft crying sound. It was so quiet that he almost thought it was his imagination. But then he heard it again, a trembling breath mixed with a painful sob. Ethan followed the sound until he turned the corner and saw Liara sitting on the floor against the wall, her knees pulled up, her face hidden in her hands. Her cloak had slipped slightly, revealing glowing patterns on her skin, bright, uneven, and beautiful, but she covered them immediately when she realized someone was watching. She gasped and pulled the cloak tightly around herself, shaking like she expected to be judged or punished. Ethan froze, not wanting to scare her. He slowly stepped forward and said softly, "Are you okay?" Liara did not look up. She whispered, "Please, do not look at me." Her voice broke in the middle, full of shame and fear. It was the first time Ethan ever heard her speak more than a few words. Something inside him tightened. It was clear that she was not hiding by choice. She was hiding because she believed she had to. He knelt down a few steps away to avoid making her feel trapped. "I am not here to judge you," he said in a calm voice. "I just want to help." Liara shook her head quickly. "No one can help, no one should see me." Her breathing was uneven, like she had been fighting tears for a long time. Ethan noticed her hands trembling under the cloak. Her whole body seemed to say she had spent years hiding, suffering, and believing she was wrong in some way. At that moment, a loud hiss echoed in the corridor. A maintenance panel beside Liara sparked and exploded with a small burst of fire. The sudden blast pushed air toward them, and Liara cried out in shock. The force knocked her hood back, and her cloak opened slightly. For the first time, Ethan saw her real appearance. Her skin had glowing marks that formed natural patterns, like starlight scattered across her body. Some parts glowed unevenly, some brighter than others. Small patches of soft fur covered her shoulders, and faint scars ran along her arms. She quickly grabbed the cloak and wrapped herself again, terrified. Her eyes were filled with panic, and she looked at Ethan as if expecting disgust. But Ethan only stared in quiet amazement. Her appearance was different, yes, but nothing about it was ugly. It was natural. It was alive. It was her. Liara could not handle his silence. She stood up and ran away, disappearing down the hallway before he could say a word. Ethan remained kneeling on the floor, stunned by the mix of fear and beauty he had just seen. He stood slowly and whispered to himself, "She is not hiding because she wants to, she is hiding because she hurts." And that night, Ethan made a quiet promise in his heart. He would find her again. He would help her. He would show her that she did not need shadows to exist. Ethan spent the next day searching for Liara, but she stayed hidden like a shadow that refused to be found. Every time he turned a corner, he expected to see her sitting quietly or walking silently along the walls, but she was nowhere. It felt strange to him how someone living on a crowded space station could disappear so perfectly. Yet Liara had learned to move in ways that kept her invisible. She arrived early when halls were empty, left late when lights were dim, and used routes no one else used. Ethan realized she lived her entire life avoiding the eyes of others. When he finally spotted her near the hydroponic garden, she froze. She looked like someone caught doing something wrong. Her cloak hood was pulled low, and her hands shook slightly as she pretended to check a plant's nutrients. Ethan stopped at a distance so she would not feel cornered, and he spoke gently, "Liara. I want to talk. Only if you want to." She hesitated, her shoulders tense, as if she was calculating whether he would judge her. For a moment, she seemed ready to run again. But then she let out a tired breath, the kind someone releases when they can no longer carry a heavy weight alone. "Why?" she whispered without looking at him. "Why do you want to talk to me?" Ethan took a step closer but still kept space between them. "Because I saw your pain yesterday. And because no one should cry alone." Her eyes lifted just a little, enough for him to see the confusion in them. "Humans are strange," she said softly, almost as if she was afraid her words might offend him. "My people do not show kindness this way." "Maybe your people were wrong," Ethan replied gently. She turned her face away quickly, and her hood hid her expression again. "You do not understand," she said, voice trembling. "I am flawed." Ethan frowned. "Flawed? By whose standards?" Liara's cloak tightened around her as if she wanted to disappear into it. "My species values symmetry. Every line, every glow pattern, every piece of fur must match. If it is uneven, it is considered ugly. Those like me are told to hide, or stay away." Her voice broke. "I was taught that no one should see me. I was taught that I bring shame." Ethan felt anger rise in his chest, not at Liara, but at the people who had made her believe such things. "You did not bring shame," he said firmly. "They did. For treating you that way." Liara shook her head. "You only say this because you do not know what I look like." Ethan gently replied, "I do. I saw you yesterday." Her breath caught. She froze completely, like ice forming in a moment of fear. "And you were not disgusted?" she asked in a cracked voice, expecting the worst. "No," Ethan said quietly, almost in disbelief that she would ask such a thing. "Why would I be?" Liara slowly sank to the ground, her cloak pooling around her. Her voice trembled. "Everyone in my tribe looked at me like I was wrong. Children laughed. Elders refused to bless me. My own parents." She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Ethan could tell that part hurt the most. He sat on the floor as well, keeping a respectful distance. "Liara, the things that make you different are the things that make you special." She hugged her knees and whispered, "No one has ever said that to me." Ethan gave a small smile. "Then I will say it again. And again. Until you believe it." For the first time, Liara looked directly at him. Her eyes shimmered with emotion, like she had been holding tears back for years. It was a moment of quiet trust, fragile, delicate, but real. She whispered, "Why are humans like this?" Ethan laughed softly. "We have our own flaws. But one thing we do well is care about people. Even strangers." Liara studied him, her expression confused and soft. For the first time, she did not pull her cloak tighter. Instead, she allowed a small part of her glowing skin to stay uncovered. Ethan noticed, but said nothing. He did not want to scare her away. But he knew one thing for sure. Liara was starting to trust him. And that trust was something she probably never felt in her entire life. The next morning, Horizon 6 felt unusually quiet to Ethan. He kept thinking about Liara's eyes from yesterday, the way they finally met his without fear, even for a few seconds. It was a small moment, but for someone like Liara, it meant a lot. He wondered how long it had been since she last felt safe around anyone. Maybe years. Maybe never. He found her again near the empty medbay. She stood by the doorway, her cloak hanging loosely instead of gripping her body tightly. It surprised him, it was the first time he had ever seen her not hiding every inch of herself. When she noticed him, she did not run or look down. Instead, she took a slow breath and said softly, "You came back." Ethan smiled gently. "I said I would." There was a moment of silence before Liara asked, "Why did you want to meet here?" Her voice carried nervousness, but also curiosity. "I want to show you something," Ethan replied. He led her inside the medbay. The room was white, bright, and quiet. In the center stood a large wall mirror, tall enough to reflect a full figure. Liara immediately tensed. She took a step back, shaking her head quickly. "No. Ethan, please. I do not want to see myself." He turned to her, his voice calm and steady. "I am not going to force you. But you told me your people taught you to hate your reflection. You told me you never looked at yourself without fear." He paused, then added softly, "I want you to see what I see." Liara's hands gripped the edges of her cloak. "You do not understand. When I look in a mirror, I only see mistakes." Ethan shook his head. "That is because someone else taught you what mistakes mean." She looked at the mirror like it was a dangerous creature. For a moment, Ethan thought she would flee. But she stood still, her breathing sharp, her shoulders shaking. It was clear that she was fighting something no one else could see. He stepped closer to her, slow and gentle. "You are safe," he said. "Nothing bad will happen. I am right here." Liara hesitated, then nodded weakly. Her fingers trembled as she slowly pulled down her hood. The soft lights reflected off her uneven glowing patterns, her small fur patches, her scars, all the things she was taught to hide. She closed her eyes as if preparing for pain. Ethan held out his hand. "You do not have to do this alone." For a long moment, she simply stared at his hand. Then, with a shaking breath, she placed her hand in his. Her skin was warm and delicate, glowing faintly beneath his touch. Together, they turned toward the mirror. Liara opened her eyes. At first, she looked away quickly, unable to hold her own reflection. But Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "Look again," he whispered. This time, she forced herself to look, really look. Her eyes widened just slightly, not in horror, but in surprise. She lifted her free hand and slowly traced the glowing lines on her cheek. They shimmered softly like starlight. Her fur patches were not ugly, they were soft, natural, and unique. Even her scars looked like stories of survival, not flaws. Liara whispered, This is me." "Yes," Ethan said softly. "And there is nothing wrong with you." She stared at her reflection, confused. "But I am not symmetrical. My people hate this." Ethan replied, "Humans are not symmetrical either. None of us are perfect. But our differences are what make us real." Liara swallowed hard, her voice trembling. I never saw myself this way." Ethan stepped behind her, visible in the mirror. "Because you were always looking through someone else's eyes. Try looking through your own." Liara stared at herself again, longer this time. The fear in her expression slowly shifted into something else, something softer. She touched her glowing neck marking and whispered, "It looks, not terrible." Ethan smiled warmly. "It looks beautiful." Tears filled her eyes, but they were not from fear. They were from relief, the kind a person feels when they realize they have been carrying a lie their whole life. Liara wiped her eyes and whispered, "Thank you, for being here." Ethan nodded. "Always." For the first time in her entire life, Liara stood in front of a mirror, without hiding. The next day on Horizon 6 felt strangely peaceful to Liara. For years, every morning had begun the same way: dread, fear, and the heavy cloak she used as armor. But today, when she woke up, she sat quietly on her small bed and stared at the folded cloak beside her. Her hands hovered above it, unsure. For the first time in her life, she did not immediately grab it. She remembered her reflection in the mirror, and Ethan's calm voice telling her she was beautiful. The memory felt like a warm light inside her chest, soft but strong. Still, leaving her room without the cloak felt impossible. Her heart pounded too fast, her breath uneven. She picked it up, dropped it, picked it up again. Finally, she whispered to herself, just once. "I will try." That whisper alone was a kind of bravery she had never known before. She stepped into the hallway. The air felt different on her skin, cooler, open, unfamiliar. Without the cloak, she felt exposed, unprotected, but also strangely free. Her glowing markings shimmered softly in the corridor lights, and her fur patches caught the faint breeze of the station's air system. Her scars were visible too, but for the first time, she did not panic when she saw them. They were part of her, and now she knew they did not define her. She walked slowly, nervous but determined. A few crew members passed, glancing her way. Immediately, Liara felt fear shoot through her, the old instinct to hide, to cover herself, to run. Her hands twitched, wanting to shield her face. But then she heard footsteps behind her, steady, familiar. Ethan walked up beside her with a gentle smile, as if he had been waiting for her. "You did it," he said softly. Liara's voice shook. "I thought I would fail." "You did not," Ethan replied. "You are walking. That is more than enough." Together they moved through the corridor. At first, Liara walked stiffly, unsure where to look. She kept her eyes down, afraid of every gaze. But Ethan stayed by her side, not touching her, not drawing attention, simply being there. His presence felt like a shield, one made not of metal but kindness. A pair of alien crew members approached, a tall officer and a young cadet. Liara felt her stomach twist. The officer looked at her markings with mild surprise, but no disgust. The real shock came from the cadet. His eyes widened in wonder. "Your markings," the young cadet whispered, staring openly. "They are beautiful." Liara froze. She almost forgot how to breathe. She had never heard that word used for her, not once, not even as a child. She expected mockery, but there was none. The boy was sincere. Ethan gave her a small, encouraging nod. Liara managed a tiny, trembling smile. "Thank you," she whispered back. As the cadet walked away, Liara felt her heart beating differently, not just fast, but strong. Something inside her shifted. For years she believed everyone would react with disgust, but here she was, standing in the open with someone calling her beautiful. She glanced at Ethan. "Did you ask him to say that?" Ethan laughed quietly. "No. Some people just see truth faster than others." Liara looked ahead again. Her steps became steadier. For the first time, she allowed her hands to relax at her sides instead of pulling at an imaginary cloak. She even lifted her chin slightly, letting the lights hit her glowing patterns. Hungry for courage, she continued walking through the main deck, the busiest place on the station. Dozens of crew members walked around, talking, repairing panels, carrying equipment. When Liara appeared, some paused in surprise. A few stared longer than she liked, but their expressions were more curious than hostile. Not a single one laughed. Ethan asked quietly, "How do you feel?" Liara thought for a moment. "Terrified," she admitted. Then, after a pause, she added, "But also free." Ethan smiled. "That is the beginning." As they approached the central lift, Liara's steps slowed. She felt something emotional rising in her chest, something warm, heavy, and unfamiliar. She reached out slowly and touched Ethan's hand. Not out of fear, but gratitude. Ethan looked at her, startled but gentle. Liara. She spoke softly, her voice full of emotion. For the first time. I do not feel invisible. He squeezed her hand lightly. That is because you never were. Liara looked around the bright corridor, her glowing skin shining softly in the station lights. For the first time in her life, she was not hiding, she was simply existing. And that alone was powerful. Liara spent the following days moving through Horizon 6 with a quiet strength she never knew she had. The fear was still there, hiding inside her like an old habit, but it no longer controlled her. Every morning, she stood in front of her small mirror before leaving her room. She still hesitated, still doubted, but then she remembered Ethan's words, "You were never broken." That single sentence repeated in her mind like a gentle heartbeat, calming her, guiding her. For the first time in her life, she walked through the halls with her real face visible. No cloak. No hood. No shadows to hide in. And every time she felt her chest tighten with panic, Ethan appeared somewhere nearby, sometimes walking beside her, sometimes watching from a distance, always ready to steady her if she stumbled. That quiet support meant more to her than he knew. One morning, she stood in the cafeteria line, staring nervously at the tray in her hands. She had never eaten with the rest of the crew before. Her claws tapped lightly against the metal tray, a soft sound she could not stop. But when she looked up, she saw Ethan sitting at a table by the window. He had purposely chosen the most open, visible seat in the room, waiting for her with a gentle smile. She sat down across from him, her hands trembling slightly, but Ethan did not mention it. He talked casually about work, repairs, and small things. Liara listened quietly, but a warm comfort spread through her chest. For the first time, she felt like she belonged at a table, like she was allowed to exist in the same space as everyone else. After breakfast, a message arrived for her, a rare event. The screen blinked with a seal she recognized instantly. Her tribe. Her heart dropped. For a moment, she could not breathe. She stared at the screen, frozen. Ethan noticed. "What is it?" "My tribe wants to speak," she whispered. Ethan stepped beside her. "Do you want me to stay?" She nodded. "Please." They entered a private communication room. Liara's hands shook as she activated the call. The hologram flickered, revealing 3 elders of her species, strict faces, perfect symmetry, cold expressions she knew too well. They stared at her appearance in silence. Her glowing markings. Her soft fur patches. Her scars. Everything they had taught her to hate. One of the elders finally spoke, voice sharp and judgmental. "Liara, we received reports that you have stopped covering yourself." Liara's heart pounded painfully. Old fear crashed into her like a wave. She felt 10 years younger, small, weak, ashamed. She wanted to hide again, but then she sensed Ethan's presence beside her, calm and steady. She took a slow breath and lifted her chin. "Yes," she said firmly. "I stopped hiding." The elders exchanged shocked looks. "You disgrace." "No," Liara interrupted, surprising even herself. "I am not a disgrace. I am not wrong. I am not broken." Her voice trembled, but it stayed strong. "I am done living in fear." The room went silent. The elders looked outraged, confused, even offended, but their words no longer cut her the way they once did. She ended the call herself, a bold act she never imagined she could do. When the screen went dark, she stepped back, breathing hard. Her legs trembled, but she felt powerful. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. "You were incredible." Liara's voice softened. "I was terrified." "Strong people usually are," Ethan replied. Later that evening, the crew held a small gathering, a casual celebration for finishing a major repair project. Liara joined them, standing near the back at first. But as people talked to her, asked her questions, complimented her markings, she slowly moved closer to the group. She even laughed once, a small sound, but real. And Ethan heard it. He smiled quietly to himself. Near the end of the gathering, Liara stood beside him by the observation window, the stars shining across her glowing skin. She looked at her reflection in the glass, not with fear, but with calm acceptance. She spoke softly, "I thought I needed to hide forever, until a human held my hand." Ethan turned to her, gentle warmth in his eyes. "You were perfect from the beginning." Liara's heart felt full, lighter than ever before. For the first time, she did not feel like a creature that needed to hide. She felt like someone who belonged. Someone who mattered. Someone seen. And together, they stood before the stars, not in shadows, but in light.